It all started when I walked in on my wife, Rachel, casually sitting on our living room couch, her legs draped over the lap of another man. Her eyes met mine with a smirk, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't even flinch when she saw the shock on my face. In that moment, she casually said, "I've opened our marriage. I invited Jamar over for a date. Do you want to watch?" Before I could even process her words, she added, "When we're done, I'll make love to you. Deal?" My heart stopped. I had no idea what to do next. But what happened next would leave me questioning everything. My marriage, my trust, my entire life. My mind raced. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. One second, I was walking into my house expecting a quiet evening, and the next, I was standing frozen in the doorway, witnessing my wife, Rachel, casually lounging with another man, Jamar, whoever he was. My pulse pounded in my ears. The world around me felt like it was closing in, and I could barely breathe. Rachel wasn't even embarrassed. She didn't rush to cover herself, to apologize, or even look surprised. She simply looked at me, that same cold smirk on her face, as if she had been waiting for me to find out. In that moment, I felt as if I was nothing more than a distant spectator in my own life. This wasn't the woman I had married. This wasn't the life I had worked so hard to build. My mind was screaming for answers, but my mouth couldn't form a single word. Jamar, the guy sitting there on my couch, didn't help. He didn't flinch, didn't show any signs of guilt. In fact, he looked entirely too comfortable. His arm rested lazily on the back of the couch, his eyes not leaving Rachel for a second. It was as if this was something they had done 1,000 times before. And as I stood there, rooted to the spot, I realized this wasn't some one-time slip-up. This was deliberate. She had planned this. Rachel then broke the silence with those words that still haunt me to this day. "I've opened our marriage. I invited Jamar over for a date. Do you want to watch?" Her voice was calm, almost bored, as if what she was saying was no big deal. "When we're done, I'll make love to you. Deal?" The casual way she said it made my stomach turn. My head spun, and I staggered back a step, fighting the overwhelming nausea rising in my throat. I couldn't process it. The betrayal, the shock, the anger, it was all too much at once. How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told me? My entire world had just shattered, and I was left standing there, helpless and unable to do anything about it. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, my mind racing, my body frozen. I wanted to scream, to shout, to break something, anything to release the anger and confusion that was consuming me. But instead, I stood there in silence, looking at the two of them like I was in some kind of twisted dream. Rachel didn't seem to care that I was standing there, frozen. She got up from the couch, casually straightening her skirt, completely unfazed by my presence. "You should just leave us to it," she said, her voice filled with arrogance. "You can come back when we're finished. It's just a little fun, you know?" Her words were like a slap to my face. She wasn't even asking for permission anymore. She was commanding me, as if she had the right to do whatever she wanted with no regard for me, for our relationship, for the vows we had taken together. I looked at Jamar, but he wasn't even acknowledging my existence. He just kept his eyes on Rachel, nodding as if this was all part of the plan. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How had things gotten this far? I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I should confront her, walk out, or just sit there in disbelief. But as the seconds passed, the rage started to build up inside of me. This wasn't some innocent mistake. This wasn't just a slip-up. This was a deliberate act of betrayal, one that had been planned out, one that she had no intention of hiding from me. Without thinking, I turned and stormed out of the room. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge, of confronting her, of demanding answers. But what answers could she possibly give me? What could she say that would make any of this make sense? I paced back and forth in the garage, my fists clenched, trying to control the anger surging through my veins. How could she do this to me? How could she do this to us? We had built our life together, our house, our future, and now she was throwing it all away for some cheap thrill. But there was something else, something deeper, a feeling of disbelief, of confusion. How had I missed all the signs? How had I not seen the way she had changed over the past few months? The late nights, the sudden need for more me time, the way she had distanced herself from me emotionally and physically. I had thought it was just a phase. I had thought it was stress from work, or maybe just a small bump in the road. But now it was all so clear. She had been planning this for months, maybe even longer, and I had been too blind to see it. I stormed back into the house, determined to confront Rachel. This time, I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of it. I needed answers, and I needed them now. But as I walked back into the living room, what I saw next shocked me even more. I returned to the living room, the coldness of the air inside, doing nothing to calm the raging fire in my chest. My breath was shallow, my thoughts clouded by the pain of what I had just witnessed. As I stepped through the door, I saw Rachel still standing there, as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't the one who had just shattered my entire world. Jamar was gone now, probably off to whatever twisted rendezvous he had planned next, leaving me with the woman I had once loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world. The woman who had just told me, with no remorse, that she had opened our marriage and invited another man into our home. There was no apology, no remorse, just that same smug look on her face, like she had won some twisted game. I could feel my hands trembling as I stepped closer to her. Every inch of my body wanted to shout, to scream, to break something. But I knew that wouldn't do any good. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, trying to control the emotions threatening to take over. Rachel looked at me with a casual expression, as if she had done nothing wrong. "You came back," she said, her tone a mix of amusement and indifference. "I didn't think you would. I figured you'd leave and give us some space." I could feel my fists balling up at my sides, but I fought to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on, Rachel?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "How long have you been seeing him? How long have you been lying to me?" Her face twisted slightly, but she didn't seem surprised. She didn't even seem ashamed. In fact, she looked almost bored, like this was just another conversation, just another day. "It doesn't matter how long, John," she said, using the name she had always called me in the most disinterested way. "What matters is that I don't need your permission for anything anymore. I'm done pretending. I've told you time and time again that things have changed, but you just didn't listen." I could feel my chest tightening. She wasn't even trying to defend herself, to explain what she had done. Instead, she was turning the blame on me, making it seem like it was my fault for not listening. It was as if she was justifying everything she had done, as if all of this, our marriage, our life together, meant nothing to her. "Done pretending?" I asked, my voice rising, the anger creeping into my tone. "What the hell does that even mean? We've been married for 5 years, Rachel. We've built a life together, and you're just throwing it away for what? A cheap thrill with some guy you met who obviously has no respect for either of us." Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, the same smirk still playing at the corners of her lips. "It's not about respect, John. It's about freedom. I've been trapped in this marriage, trapped in this life. I've been pretending to be something I'm not just to keep you happy. But I'm done with that." Her words cut deeper than anything I'd heard so far. I had never expected this from her. I had never thought that she would be capable of destroying everything we had built, everything we had worked for, just for the sake of her own selfish desires. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about our life together. All she cared about was herself, her pleasure, and her freedom. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, and for a moment, I thought I might explode. But then I took a step back. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about me too. It was about the man I had become, the one who had let this happen, the one who had ignored the signs for so long. I had trusted her blindly, had put my faith in her without ever questioning it. And now, here I was, standing in front of her, with nothing but a broken heart and a shattered future. "You don't get to do this to me," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You don't get to destroy everything we've built and then just walk away like it's nothing. I deserve more than this, Rachel. I deserve honesty. I deserve respect. And I'm not going to let you tear me apart just because you're bored with me." Rachel just laughed. It was a cold, cruel laugh that sent a chill down my spine. "You're so naive," she said, shaking her head. You still don't get it, do you? This wasn't about you. It was never about you. You were just a safety net, John. You were the guy who kept everything together while I did what I really wanted. And now I'm done. I'm done with you. Done with this marriage. I'm free. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was telling me that all this time, all the love I had given her, all the support I'd been, meant nothing to her. I was nothing but a means to an end. And now, she was throwing it all away without a second thought. I stood there, trying to process everything she had just said. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart, but there was something else, something I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the pain of her betrayal. It was the realization that I had been living in a lie. And now, that lie was crumbling around me. Rachel wasn't sorry. She wasn't even apologizing. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was cold, indifferent, and dismissive. She had already made up her mind, and nothing I said or did was going to change it. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I had to stay strong. I had to take control of this situation, even if it meant walking away from everything I had known. I want a divorce, I said, my voice steady. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. The words I had just spoken felt like they were echoing in the silence of the room. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the realization that this was really happening slowly sinking in. Rachel was no longer my wife. I wasn't her husband anymore. Everything I had believed in, every moment I had invested in this relationship, had just been shattered in front of my eyes. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care. She stood there, leaning against the wall, arms folded across her chest, a smirk still playing on her lips. There was no sign of guilt, no remorse. She wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she was relieved that she had finally gotten rid of the man she had outgrown, the man she had used, and the man she had betrayed. In that moment, I realized how far removed she had become from the woman I once knew, the woman I had loved. I'm glad you finally got the picture, John, she said coldly. I've been waiting for you to say that for so long. I was done with this marriage long before you figured it out. I stood there, paralyzed. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and pain. How had things gotten this bad? How had I not seen the signs sooner? For years, I had trusted her blindly, giving her everything I had, and now I was left standing here, heartbroken and betrayed by someone who had once promised to love me, for better or for worse. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was a complete dismantling of everything I believed to be true. I thought back to the first time I had met Rachel. She had been kind, loving, full of life and excitement. We had so many plans together, traveling, buying a house, starting a family. It was supposed to be us against the world, no matter what came our way. But somehow, somewhere along the way, Rachel had changed. I hadn't seen it at first, too busy with my own life, too distracted by work, but now it was so obvious. She had been planning this for months, maybe longer. She had slowly and carefully started pulling away from me, emotionally and physically, until she found someone else to fill the gap. And the worst part was that she had been lying to me the entire time. I had given her everything. I had supported her dreams, put up with her bad days, celebrated her successes, and held her when she cried. I had been her partner in every sense of the word. And this is how she repaid me, by throwing it all away for the sake of her own selfish desires. Rachel seemed to be reading my thoughts because she spoke again, her voice dripping with indifference. You don't get it, do you? You were never enough for me. You were just a backup, someone to keep the illusion of a perfect life while I went out and did what I really wanted. But now I'm done pretending. I found someone who knows how to give me what I need. I could feel the rage building up inside me again, but I forced myself to stay calm. She wasn't worth the fight. She wasn't worth my energy. As much as I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to scream at the unfairness of it all, I knew it wouldn't change anything. Rachel had made her choice, and I needed to make mine. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and spoke through gritted teeth. I can't believe you. I gave you everything, Rachel. I trusted you with my heart, my life, and you just threw it all away. Do you even feel anything for me anymore? Or was I just a convenient place to land when you got tired of whatever you were doing? Rachel didn't flinch at my words. She didn't even look sorry. In fact, she almost seemed relieved. It's not about feelings, John. This is about freedom. I don't need you to take care of me anymore. I don't need to keep pretending that I'm happy with you, that I'm satisfied with this life. I want more, and I'm going to get it. The more she spoke, the more I realized just how much of a stranger she had become. This wasn't the woman I had married. This wasn't the woman I had built a life with. The woman standing in front of me now was cold, callous, and utterly unrecognizable. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. She wasn't the woman who had promised to be there through thick and thin. No, this was someone else. Someone who didn't care about me, about our marriage, about anything but herself. Tears of frustration and anger welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to let her see me break. Not now. Not when I was finally realizing how badly I had been duped, how much I had allowed her to control my life. I had been living in a lie for far too long, and it was time to stop. I needed to take control of my life. I needed to move on. I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I'm done with you. I'm done with this marriage. You've made your choice, Rachel. And now, I'm making mine. Rachel's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, maybe regret, maybe anger, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She didn't even try to fight for me. She didn't even try to make it right. Instead, she simply nodded and turned away, dismissing me like I was nothing. Good luck with your life, John, she said, her voice cold and uncaring. I hope you find someone who can give you what you need. And with that, she walked away, leaving me standing there, alone in the living room we once shared. The silence was deafening. The silence after Rachel left felt like it was suffocating me. I stood there in the middle of our living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I knew, trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. It was like a bad dream, something I couldn't wake up from, no matter how hard I tried. But it was real. It was happening, and I had to face it. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to steady my breathing, but the anger and confusion were still bubbling beneath the surface. How could she do this to me? How could she throw everything we had away for some selfish pleasure? I had given her everything. I had been there for her when she needed me, loved her when she felt lost, and worked tirelessly to build a life together. And this was how she repaid me? By walking away, as if nothing mattered? It hurt, more than I could put into words. But the pain was beginning to transform into something else, something harder, something that felt like strength. The more I thought about what Rachel had said, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of her lies and betrayal. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when she had already checked out. I needed to move on. I had always believed that when something like this happened, it was a one-time mistake, something that could be fixed with communication, with therapy, with time. But Rachel had made it clear that she was done, that she had already made her choice. She had been living a lie, and now, so was I if I continued to hold on to this marriage. There was no going back. Not after what she had said. Not after what she had done. I walked into the kitchen, trying to find some sense of normalcy, but everything fell off. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a foreign place. The pictures on the walls, the furniture, the small little things that had once brought comfort to my life, now felt like reminders of a past that I could never get back. Rachel wasn't just betraying me. She was erasing everything we had built together. I opened the refrigerator, even though I wasn't hungry, and grabbed a bottle of water. My hands were still shaking, and I could feel the anger threatening to resurface. But this time, I was determined not to let it consume me. I had to stay calm. I had to make decisions based on logic, not on the hurt that was still gnawing at my insides. What was I supposed to do now? What were my options? I could stay and fight for a marriage that Rachel clearly didn't want anymore, but that would only drag me down further. I could try to salvage what was left of our relationship, but deep down, I knew it was beyond repair. She had already made her choice. She had already moved on. And no matter how much I wanted things to go back to the way they were, I couldn't force it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the only option left for me was to move forward, to take control of my own life, to stop living in the past and start focusing on the future. I wasn't sure what that future looked like yet, But one thing was certain. I was done with Rachel. I was done with the lies, the betrayal, and the disrespect. It was time for me to rebuild my life, to find out who I was outside of this marriage, and to reclaim my happiness. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still trembling as I tried to steady my thoughts. I thought about the last few years, about how I had always put Rachel's needs before my own, how I had done everything in my power to make her happy, even when she stopped trying. And now, it was clear that all of that had been for nothing. She didn't care, but I had to care about myself. I had to put myself first for once. I had to stop letting her decisions dictate my happiness. It was going to be hard. I knew that. There were still so many questions left unanswered, so many feelings of betrayal that I would have to work through. But I couldn't let her control me anymore. I couldn't let her continue to shape my future when she had already chosen hers. I stood up from the table, my decision made. I was going to file for divorce. I was going to walk away from this broken marriage and start over. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was the right one. Rachel wasn't the woman I married. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. And no matter how much I wanted to hold on to the past, I couldn't. I had to let go. I had to move on. I walked to the phone and dialed the number for a divorce attorney. It felt surreal, like I was calling someone else's life. But it was my life. This was happening, and I had to face it head on. As I sat there, waiting for the attorney to pick up, I realized that this was the beginning of something new for me. It was going to be a long road, full of pain and frustration, but I was finally taking control. I was finally putting myself first. And no matter how hard it got, I wasn't going to let Rachel, or anyone else, hold me back anymore. The days that followed Rachel's departure were filled with a strange mix of emotions. The initial anger had faded, but in its place, there was a gnawing emptiness that refused to go away. I could still feel the weight of everything she had said, everything she had done, hanging over me like a dark cloud. The house, once full of laughter and warmth, now felt like a prison. Every corner, every room, seemed to remind me of the life I had lost. But more than anything, I was left with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Rachel had been my partner, my confidant, the woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world. And now, she had torn everything apart without a second thought. She had moved on, but I was still here, trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered future. I had spent the first few days in a haze, barely able to focus on anything. My mind kept replaying the same scenes over and over. The way she had looked at me when she told me she was done, the cold indifference in her voice as she dismissed me. It was as if she had already let go of everything, while I was still clinging to a memory of what we once had. I hadn't expected it to be easy. I knew that divorce would be a long and painful process, especially with the emotions still running high. But what I hadn't anticipated was the overwhelming loneliness that would settle in. The house was empty, quiet, and every minute I spent in it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. The silence was deafening, and every time I looked at our wedding photos, every time I saw something that reminded me of her, the pain felt like it was choking me. But there was something else that I hadn't been prepared for: the guilt. I kept thinking that maybe I had missed something, some sign that would have helped me prevent this from happening. Maybe if I had been more attentive, if I had paid more attention to the way Rachel had been acting, things might have turned out differently. Maybe if I had done something differently, if I had said something sooner, she wouldn't have left. But as much as I tried to blame myself, deep down, I knew the truth. Rachel had made her choice. She had made the decision to cheat, to betray me, and there was nothing I could have done to stop it. She had already checked out of our marriage long before I had even figured out what was happening. The fault wasn't mine. Still, the guilt lingered, refusing to let me move on. I had to remind myself over and over that I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo what had been done. All I could do now was focus on the present and take the necessary steps to move forward. One of the hardest things I had to do was start the divorce process. It felt like the final nail in the coffin, like admitting that everything was really over. I had to make a decision about what I wanted, what I deserved. The attorney had been professional, but every word he spoke made everything feel more real. The papers were filed, the process had begun, and there was no going back. Rachel didn't seem to care about the divorce proceedings. She didn't call, didn't try to reach out, and I had no idea what she was doing or where she was going. But I knew one thing. She was moving on. She was out there, living her life with Jamar, or whoever else was in the picture. She wasn't wasting a second thinking about me. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. Rachel had moved on, and I was the one left picking up the pieces. I had to accept it, no matter how much it hurt. As the days turned into weeks, I started to do what I could to take care of myself. I started going to the gym again, something I had neglected during the last months of our marriage. I started focusing on work, diving into projects that I had been putting off. I began spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people I had neglected during my marriage. I was slowly starting to rebuild my life, piece by piece. But the loneliness was still there. It wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. There were nights when I found myself lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I would think about Rachel, about what she had done, and I couldn't help but feel betrayed all over again. It was hard to accept that she was never coming back. It was hard to accept that everything I had believed in, everything I'd worked for, was now in the past. But as time went on, I started to realize that I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move forward. I had to let go of Rachel, even if it meant facing the pain and heartbreak that came with it. I couldn't keep holding on to a relationship that was already dead. It was time to stop grieving for the woman who had betrayed me and start focusing on myself. I had to rebuild my confidence, my sense of self-worth, and my future. It wasn't going to be easy. There were still moments when the pain would overwhelm me, when I would wonder what went wrong and what I could have done differently. But I knew that I couldn't keep questioning myself. I had to keep moving forward one step at a time. And with each passing day, I started to feel a little bit stronger, a little bit more like myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but at least I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Rachel's betrayal define me. I was going to take control of my life, and I was going to move on. Time marched on, and I found myself caught in an endless internal battle. The physical space Rachel had once occupied in my life had begun to feel empty, but the emotional space she left behind was far more haunting. The weight of betrayal was something I couldn't easily escape. I'd wake up every morning with the same sense of dread, as if the day ahead was another reminder of everything I had lost. Yet, even in this struggle, I knew one thing. I had to keep moving forward, even if it meant walking through the darkness. Some days were better than others. Some days I could wake up, take a deep breath, and just keep moving. Other days, it felt as if the universe was mocking me, throwing obstacle after obstacle in my path, testing my resolve. My friends were supportive, but I knew they didn't truly understand what I was going through. They couldn't. I had been living this life for years. I had given everything to Rachel, and she had walked away without a second thought. Now, I was left alone, struggling to find some kind of balance in the wreckage of a life I didn't recognize anymore. It was a strange feeling, this loneliness. It wasn't just being by myself. It was the absence of trust, the absence of companionship. There was no one to turn to when I had a bad day. There was no one to share a meal with, to talk to about the things that mattered. I found myself scrolling aimlessly through my phone, searching for something to distract me from the thoughts that kept circling in my mind. But there was no easy distraction, no quick fix. There was only the reality of what had happened, of what Rachel had done. And still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Even after everything she had done, after all the hurt she had caused me, there was a part of me that still blamed myself. It was the voice in the back of my head, whispering, maybe you missed something. Maybe you could have done better. Maybe if you had just been more attentive, more understanding, none of this would have happened. I had spent so many years focused on making her happy, on keeping our relationship intact, that I had neglected my own needs, my own desires. Maybe that's what Rachel had seen. Maybe she had seen me as a crutch, something stable, but uninteresting. Maybe that's why she had sought out someone else. I hated myself for even entertaining those thoughts. Rachel had made her choice. She had chosen to betray me, and she had done so repeatedly. But the emotional scars she left behind were not so easily dismissed. Every time I saw a couple together, Every time I saw someone with the kind of love and trust one had once had, I felt this pang of longing, of sadness. I missed it. I missed the way it had felt to be loved, to be wanted. I missed the feeling of having someone by my side, someone who cared about me the way I cared about them. But that was all gone now. I couldn't keep living in the past, couldn't keep chasing something that was never coming back. I had to focus on the future, on rebuilding myself from the ground up. The pain wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. It wasn't something I could simply move on from by making a few changes in my life. No, this was going to take time. Time to heal, time to rediscover who I was, time to forgive myself and let go of the past. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to face it. As the weeks turned into months, I began to focus more on the things that had once brought me joy. I started traveling again, something Rachel and I had always promised to do, but never got around to. I went to the places I had dreamed of visiting, saw new sights, met new people. It wasn't just about running away from my problems. It was about rediscovering who I was, about reconnecting with the passions and interests I had put on the back burner while I was trying to make a marriage work. I took up new hobbies, explored new parts of the city I had never noticed before, and began to let go of the idea that I needed someone else to complete me. I started reading again, something I had always loved, but had let slip when I had been consumed with trying to hold my marriage together. I worked out more, not to impress anyone, but for myself, for my own well-being. Slowly but surely, I was starting to feel like a whole person again. But even with all this progress, there were still moments of doubt, moments where I wondered if I would ever truly be free of the pain Rachel had caused me. I still thought about her, still wondered what she was doing, still hated the fact that she had moved on so easily. Sometimes I would see her on social media, happy and carefree, and it would sting like 1,000 little cuts. It was unfair. She had destroyed our life together, and yet she seemed so unfazed by it. She was living her life without a care in the world, while I was still stuck in the aftermath, trying to put the pieces back together. And in those moments, the anger would resurface. It would bubble up from the pit of my stomach, and I would want to scream, to lash out, to make her feel the pain I had felt. But I knew better now. I knew that holding onto that anger, that resentment, would only keep me trapped in the past. It wouldn't make me feel better. It would only poison my mind and my heart. So, I focused on the future. I focused on what I could control, my life, my happiness, my well-being. I stopped allowing Rachel to have any power over me. She had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. I was done with the past. I was done with her. It wasn't easy. The idea of moving on, of letting go of everything I had known, was daunting, and at times it felt impossible. But the more I reflected, the more I understood that holding on to the past was only hurting me. The pain from Rachel's betrayal had been suffocating, and I had let it consume me for far too long. But now, something in me had changed. I wasn't going to let her keep me trapped in this emotional prison. I began taking small steps toward my own healing. I didn't have any grand plans to completely reinvent myself, but I knew I needed to make some changes. I had spent so long catering to Rachel's needs, trying to be the perfect husband, that I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted, and what made me happy. It was time to rediscover all of that. I took a trip, something spontaneous, just me, myself, and the open road. I had always wanted to go to the mountains, to get away from everything and clear my mind. So one weekend, I packed a bag, grabbed my car keys, and drove. The fresh mountain air, the vastness of the landscape, it gave me the space I needed to think, to process everything that had happened, and to let go of some of the anger. I spent the entire weekend hiking, reflecting on what I had been through, and slowly, I began to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about acceptance. I had to accept what Rachel had done, and I had to stop allowing it to define my future. It wasn't just about leaving the house or traveling to new places. It was about letting go of the emotional baggage I had been carrying for far too long. I had to stop letting Rachel's actions haunt me. I had to stop letting her dictate how I felt and how I lived. And that wasn't easy. There were nights when I would lie awake in bed, thinking about her, wondering what could have been and questioning what went wrong. But I started practicing the art of letting go. I told myself that the past was in the past, and I had no control over it anymore. I had always been a person who tried to avoid confrontation, who wanted to keep the peace. But now, for the first time in a long time, I had to be brutally honest with myself. Rachel had betrayed me, and she had walked away from our life without a second thought. She had no regrets, no remorse. And as much as it hurt, I had to learn to stop caring about what she thought about what she was doing. I had to learn to care about myself again. I started focusing more on my work, diving into new projects, taking on challenges I had previously avoided. Work became an outlet for me, something I could pour my energy into without worrying about the constant weight of Rachel's betrayal hanging over me. It was therapeutic in a way, helping me find my footing again and regain my sense of purpose. The more I invested in my career, the less time I had to dwell on the past. It didn't solve all my problems, but it gave me a sense of direction. Alongside work, I reconnected with friends. Over the years, I had become distant from some of them, focusing too much on my relationship with Rachel. But now I was reaching out again, reminding myself of the importance of community and the people who truly cared about me. I went out to dinner, spent weekends with them, and allowed myself to laugh and enjoy life again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage, outside of the man who had been betrayed. It felt liberating. But even in the midst of all this change, there were moments when I would catch myself slipping, moments when the loneliness would hit hard. I would find myself missing Rachel, even though I knew deep down that I didn't want her back. I would miss the comfort of having someone by my side, of sharing my life with someone I trusted. But I reminded myself that the person I missed was not the woman she had become, but the woman I thought she was. The person I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I had to remind myself, again and again, that I was better off without her. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days, I felt like I was making progress. Other days, it felt like I was taking 2 steps backward. But the important thing was that I was moving forward. I was no longer allowing Rachel's actions to control my emotions or my life. I was starting to reclaim my own identity, my own happiness. I started to think about my future, about what I wanted from life. Maybe one day I would love again. Maybe one day I would find someone who would appreciate me for who I truly was, someone who would never betray my trust. But for now, I was focusing on me. I was focusing on being whole again, on finding peace within myself. I had been broken, but I was beginning to heal. The scar that Rachel had left would always be there, but I was learning how to live with it. I was learning to accept the past for what it was and to embrace the future with open arms. And as I stood there, looking out over the horizon, I realized something important. I was stronger than I had ever known. The pain I had experienced had shaped me, but it would no longer define me. I had the power to rebuild my life, to create something new. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was possible. And that, for the first time in a long time, made me believe in the future again. It had been several months since Rachel left, and as time passed, I began to see things in a new light. The pain, while still lingering in the background, wasn't all-consuming anymore. The anger, the frustration, the questions, they were still there at times, but they no longer ruled my life. The pieces of my broken world were slowly coming back together. And while it wasn't perfect, it was mine. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. I could feel the weight on my chest lifting, even if it was just a little at a time. I started to look at my life with a sense of possibility. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about reclaiming who I was and rebuilding a future that I could be proud of. I had always thought I would be defined by my marriage, by my relationship with Rachel. But as the months had gone by, I realized I was more than that. I was more than a man who had been betrayed. I was a person with dreams, ambitions, and a future that was entirely in my hands. It was in the small moments that I started to feel the most change. The first time I laughed without feeling guilty about it. The first time I didn't think about Rachel in the middle of the day. The first time I went out to dinner with a group of friends and genuinely enjoyed myself. These moments reminded me that I was slowly finding myself again. And the more I experienced those moments, the more I realized that I wasn't just recovering. I was evolving. I started dating again, tentatively at first. The idea of letting someone into my life felt foreign, almost frightening. But I also knew that I couldn't let the past dictate my future. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Rachel. I wasn't looking to find love again right away. What I was looking for was connection. I wanted to see if I could trust again, if I could open up to someone without the constant fear of betrayal hanging over me. The first few dates were awkward. I found myself comparing every woman I met to Rachel, wondering if they were going to be as cruel, as cold, as indifferent. But with each date, I began to realize that not every person would hurt me the way she did. Not every relationship would end in disaster. And while it was hard to let go of the fear that I would be hurt again, I knew I had to take the risk if I ever wanted to experience love again. I took things slowly, letting the relationships unfold naturally. I met women who were kind, who were real, who didn't play games. And as I spent more time with them, I realized that I was capable of loving again, of trusting again. I wasn't broken beyond repair. I was a person who had experienced something terrible, yes, but I had also learned and grown from it. Work continued to be an important part of my life, not just as a distraction, but as a source of fulfillment. I threw myself into new projects, took on leadership roles, and started feeling a sense of pride in my work again. It had always been a passion of mine, but during my marriage, I had let it take a back seat to my relationship. Now, it was a space where I could grow, where I could prove to myself that I was more than just a husband. I was a professional, capable and skilled, driven to succeed. And it wasn't just my career and my personal life that were improving. I also started to take better care of myself physically. The gym had become a sanctuary for me, a place where I could push myself and get lost in the routine of lifting weights, running on the treadmill, or practicing yoga. It was a place where I could focus on my body, on my health, and not on the mess that my past had left me with. The emotional scars were still there, but they weren't as deep as they once were. I was learning to forgive myself for the things I had blamed myself for the ways I had let myself get lost in Rachel's world. I had given her too much power, too much control over my life. But now, I was learning to take that control back. It wasn't easy, and there were still times when I found myself thinking about the past. I would think about Rachel, about how things could have been different, about the promises we had made to each other. But every time those thoughts came to mind, I reminded myself of the truth. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. The woman I had married wouldn't have betrayed me, wouldn't have destroyed everything for selfish reasons. And as much as it hurt to admit it, I had to accept that the person I had loved no longer existed. But even though she was gone, I wasn't alone. I had friends, I had a career, and I had a future to look forward to. And most importantly, I had myself. I had the strength to move on, to rebuild, to thrive despite the setbacks. I wasn't going to let Rachel define me. I wasn't going to let her actions dictate how I viewed love, trust, or my own worth. One day, I woke up and realized that I was happy. I wasn't in a relationship, I wasn't with anyone, but I was content. I had peace. I had built a life that was my own. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The chains that had once held me down, the weight of betrayal, were no longer dragging me under. I had overcome the worst thing that could have happened to me, and I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I had ever been. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was the man who had rebuilt his life. And that, to me, was more important than anything Rachel had ever taken from me.